hose, and it compresses and relaxes. And as a result, what the calcium compresses, but the magnesium is there for the relaxation. And so they say that somebody said that if we all took a lot more magnesium, you'd be able to eliminate 50% of the hospital beds in the United States. I don't know whether it's true or not, but yes, Stan.
Bob Cathcart always said, not vitamin C. It's sodium ascorbate.
Sodium ascorbate, yes.
In other words, ascorbic acid needs to be neutralized.
Yes.
When you're taking large amounts, and everybody should know that.
Yeah, that's right. Because if it's done intravenously, it's not vein friendly, so the sodium buffers it.
Ascorbic acid is pH 1. It's this very strong acid. And it needs to be neutralized to pH 7 so the body can handle it.
Beautiful. Okay.
You know, Stan, I got to say, I spent some time, about a half hour with Bob Cathcart, and he said no. He said if you want the effect of vitamin C, you do straight ascorbic acid. He said IV, you have no choice but to do the huge amounts with the sodium ascorbate, and then whatever buffering solution you might use. But he said he's never had a problem, because I always thought teeth fall out, osteoporosis, all kinds of problems, and he said he's never had a problem with that, so I was quite surprised.
He always used sodium ascorbate.
For IV drip. You have to use it for IV.
It's not for oral.
Yeah.
This connects with Dr. Delgado and you see, I had a recurring infection in my left eye, and my eye doctor would prescribe antibiotics, and they would go and they would come back again. I said, well, I'll be getting chelation from Dr. Delgado, and that should cure it. He was kind of cuckoo. And anyway, after about 6 sessions chelation, my infection disappeared. And then doctor examined my eyes and said, your eyes haven't been better.
Have never been better.
Better. So then the book, he didn't want to look at, you know, bypassing the bypass. He asked me to loan it to him.
Yeah, I think Bob Cathcart made a statement one. Yes, Bernie.
On the vitamin C, 2 things you can do for those who have allergies. The best form of vitamin C is beet, from beet source.
Is what?
The corn has a very high allergenic factor to most people. Beet does not. In Europe, they only use beet vitamin C.
Made from beets?
Beets, yeah. That's, you can get that from Intensive Nutrition. They have that. And I usually request that all the time. And the other thing, the studies in PubMed show that ascorbyl palmitate is even more effective than vitamin C, both in its antioxidant function, but it's even more effective if you have cancer. You should only use the form of ascorbyl palmitate. And that's also in Group Karasaga's segment, and it's published in several journals now.
Any other questions? Yes.
Are there any side effects to strontium?
To what?
Strontium.
In certain large amounts, yes.
I have no idea.
It's a mineral that's used for bone, for improving bone.
Strontium is difficult to find. There's a thing called strontium ranulate that is only available in Europe in high doses, and that's probably what people are looking for. And it sometimes causes a little valve.
Yeah. Why don't you pass the mic around? Might be a good idea.
There's a product called strontium ranulate that's only available in Europe. It's not available in this country. And it's being used more for osteoporosis. I think the only side effect is probably a little bit of GI intolerance. Other than that, I don't think there's any other problems with it. It's just not available. But we'll hear more about it.
Yeah. Okay. Next question for this group of geniuses that we have up front here.
I'm just going to mention to everybody that maybe, especially for new people, check out the website. I didn't have time because of a little neck injury I got to print out the list of the now, this will be the 83rd video we've done at the Smart Life Forum. So I'm happy to say, but turn off your cell phones if you're anywhere within 10 or 15 feet of me, not just a ringer, because it destroyed almost your talk last month. I heard. So if you're anywhere near the electricity or the camera, make sure it's completely off. Thanks.
Okay. Any other question on any subject or anything that you've heard about? Yes.
About a week ago, there was an announcement about Cipro, the antibiotic. I was wondering if anybody knew anything about that, because my doctor just prescribed that for me. I'm not sure if I want to take it or not.
Okay, Mr. Basher. What?
Cipro is a really good antibiotic. It's a broad spectrum antibiotic. It's really well tolerated. I think the thing that you're referring to is they're seeing some interaction or some side effect with tendinous injuries. So people are snapping their tendons. I've never seen this, and I've used Cipro for 15, 20 years. So all these things are possible. I think there's some other ones like Levaquin probably have a higher incidence of this. But I think that's
Could
probably
you
what
speak
you're
more loudly, please?
I can't hear you back
He's
there.
got a mic, turn on his mic.
That mic doesn't work for that portable one.
I'm conserving my voice.
Why don't you move up closer? There's plenty of room up here. That would help. If you
There we
can't
go.
hear him back there.
Well, they
Let me
should-
try that again.
They should have a mic.
I think the thing that you were referring to is that Cipro
Cipro
has been associated with tendinous injuries and actually ruptures. If I'm not mistaken, I think Levaquin has been associated with even higher incidence. Personally, I've never seen this with Cipro, and I've been using Cipro for 15 or 20 years. But that's probably what you read, that it's associated with some of these tendinous injuries. There's a lot more dangerous drugs out there than Cipro.
Thank you.
Like Fosamax, Coumadin.
Any other questions? Any other thought? Yes.
Speaking of Fosamax, if somebody, not me, but if somebody is taking it for a long, long time, would you suggest they stop it, or should they continue if they've been taking it like umpteen years?
You know, it's like asking me, well, I've been taking Coumadin for the last 15 years, should I just stop it? It's a difficult question because it depends on who you're working with and how open they are to trying other approaches and what other things you've done to optimize your osteoporosis regimen. Because frankly, when I treat people, I don't put anybody on a Fosamax. And it takes a long time. It takes maybe 3 to 5 years if you can see the differences. And I know I'm beginning to see the differences with high doses of vitamin D and vitamin K and hormones and strontium and other things. So the answer is probably you don't need it. But I can't tell you stop it. It is something you have to talk with your doctor or other people who are knowledgeable about, what does your DEXA scan look like, where are you, and why are you taking it? The one caveat, though, is when you have your teeth taken out, that's where it becomes a real problem.
No, I don't take it because my doctor tried to get me to take it, and I said no, and she said, which one of us has a medical degree here?
Well, the answer is, with most of my patients, you vote with your feet and you find another doctor. When you find someone who gives you that kind of a rigid answer, you need to find someone who's a little bit more open. That's all. It's that simple, okay? And don't tell me it's the only doctor that's in your network or the only one accepts your insurance or whatever. You find another doc who is more receptive to, say, working with you than working above you.
You mentioned Coumadin. What is the problem with Coumadin? What could you replace it with?
We've talked about this before. Coumadin is an anticoagulant, and it's used for if you've had valve replacements, or if you've got atrial fibrillation, or anything where you're trying to prevent a stroke. The problem is, I'm really convinced now, because I've seen it over and over and over again, that Coumadin will cause osteoporosis, and in most men, probably in women, you will eventually develop aortic stenosis, and you'll probably end up having a valve replacement if you're on long enough. You can ask Mike Corrick, you can ask a number of my patients. I see this over and over again. And it's actually, the mechanism is well proven.
What is aortic stenosis?
It's when the valve that leads from your heart to the rest of your body, to your brain, and the rest of your body, it gets so tight that the blood can't get out. And when it gets in, and at a certain point, no blood is flowing out of the heart. And when that happens, you need a valve replacement. There's a certain critical measurement where the valve needs to be replaced. And I've seen this over and over again in my patients.
What is the best substitute?
Well, the problem is it's a difficult, again, I can't give these things off the cuff because you can't just do this. You have to be under some sort of care with someone who knows what they're doing. But it's real simple for me. I put people on high-dose vitamin C, vitamin E, ginkgo biloba, nattokinase, and high-dose fish oils. And I've got this all proven. It works, it's effective, and it works better than Coumadin. The science is behind it. I've seen it all. I've got enough nutty patients, they've all overdosed on every one of these things. And I know that this works better than Coumadin, and you don't get toxic on it. But you can't take to your cardiologist and say, hey, some guy told me this is what I want to do. And he said, oh, that's great, let's just try that, okay? You're not going to get one cardiologist that I know of in this country, including Steven Sinatra, to buy into this.
Yeah, he will.
But you know what? They will. Give it 5 or 10 years and they will.
Right on.
Do any of you ever listen to Dr. Dawn on Saturday or Sunday morning? Ask Dr. Dawn. If you haven't, you ought to tune into her or go onto her website, askdrdawn, DAWN.com. Somebody asked her a similar question just the other day about Coumadin. She said the practice in the community is Coumadin. She says, I have to recommend Coumadin to you because if I don't and you die, I am responsible. Because she says I have no legal status, nobody's going to back me up. But she says if you're smart, you'll look for alternatives.
Get that again.
I beg your pardon?
Yes, Dr.
Basically, that's a CYA answer.
Yeah.
And a CYA answer is because my insurance, because of the medical community, because of my colleagues, a variety of people. I'm either nutty or brave, because I tell people flat out, I want them off Coumadin. But you got to be under care. You can't do it. Just you have to have someone who's going to follow you and watch out. Okay.
Is it true, Bill, that Coumadin is a rat poison?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's both figurative and literal. Coumadin is warfarin. Sodium warfarin is rat poison. I mean, just flat out, it's rat poison.
Has anyone tried your mixture of fish oil and others as a rat poison?
We've been in it now, Phil.
Phil's rat poison.
See, only he would ask me that.
No,
Try that.
I might suggest that people...
Holistic rats, okay.
If people look through our list of videos, we had a really great lecture by Dr. Ralph Holsworth, who worked with Professor Sumi, who isolated in 1980 at University of Illinois, Chicago, while he was studying for his medical degree. The natto, the active enzyme in nattokinase, which they've eaten for 1,000 years in Japan. He took a lady who was on heavy Coumadin, and in 8 days, and I had a conversation with him and a big vitamin company, I did a 3-way call, and he said in 8 days, completely off the Coumadin, she had symptoms from it, and she was back to normal blood pressure with just the nattokinase. And I suppose, along with the other ideas that Phil has, are fabulous. So I concur.
Well, what's interesting, you can always get these sort of isolated incidents. You know, I had this one patient, she was dying, I pulled her back, and I'm really great. But the thing is, I put all my patients on nattokinase.
Good.
And so I've seen the ones who don't take it and who do take it. And I have people come to me who have coagulation disorders where, you know, they're 60 times more likely to have a blood clot. And as long as they keep on natto and all these others at high dose, they can do things that other people can't do.
You put
So
them on what?
nattokinase.
How do you spell that?
N-A-T-T-O-K-I-N-A-S-E. T-T-O-K-I-N-A-S-E.
K or without vitamin K?
Doesn't matter. The vitamin K is immaterial. The only reason why you even worry about vitamin K is they'll say, well, this nattokinase doesn't have vitamin K, and therefore you can take it with Coumadin. Well, that's, you know, you got to take nattokinase and Coumadin with a lot of care anyway. So the vitamin K is kind of a red herring.
Okay, Mike, you want to come up and introduce Dr. Phil here?
Okay, here we go.
God love him.
whole facility where people can, take many tests, do exercise and fitness things. So it's going to be a very interesting talk. In September, Cheryl Selman, who was here before, is coming back. She's the one who spoke on Don't Let Your Daughters Get Breast Cancer. And October 16th, Larry Roberts. Do you people know who Larry Roberts is? He's the husband of Catherine Gross, who was here, ex-husband, and the co-founder and the brains behind Smart Life Forum.
Which started out in his house.
And it started in their house. And he's also the primary inventor of the internet. These people don't know. And he is coming with his spouse, Teddy Rinker, who's a DO, and they're going to talk about her new book called The Renegade Patient. In November, John Gray is coming back to talk about Mars and Venus in collision. So now, to introduce Dr. Phil here, UC Berkeley, with biochemistry, UC San Diego School of Medicine, and he worked for Julian Whitaker in 1994. He founded the Los Gatos Longevity Institute in 1996, and one of the first in the nation to be involved in anti-aging medicine. He's the author of a life extension book. You can see in the back, isn't it? The Revolution in Anti-Aging, and many new exciting projects in progress. His website is antiaging-com. I give you Phil Miller.
Thank you, Mike. Is this on? Is it going? Can you hear me?
No, but see, that's funny for the video.
It got me most interested in the subject of vitamin D. He's introduced me to all of the experts in the world on vitamin D. The good thing about vitamin D is there's no money in it, and because there's no money in it, the people who are really the top researchers in the world are about 4 or 5 of them, and they really love this subject. And they're very accessible, so when I email them, they almost always email me within a few hours to a day or two. So it's a real tight community of people. What's interesting is that vitamin D is now in the news, and this is sort of the reason why we're doing this talk tonight. I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. Vitamin D is one of the few subjects in the news lately that has not been getting bad press, because just about everything else gets bad press. There's always some guy who says, oh, that's all a bunch of BS. But vitamin D seems to be the one thing that everybody's saying, hey, this really is for real stuff. This really cures a lot of different conditions, and we probably are not getting enough vitamin D. So let me tell you, let me go real quickly through some aspects of how you look at the heart, and then I'm going to show you why vitamin D is important for the heart and what the 3 studies are. The 3 studies show vitamin D is really beneficial in heart disease, and then I'm going to critique these studies because there's some problems with it. So let me show you really quickly. This is Leonardo da Vinci. That's the heart. This is the heart. When I told you about the aortic valve, this is the aortic valve right here. And this is kind of how it all works here. It goes to the lungs, comes back from the lungs, goes out the aortic valve right here. That's basically how the heart works, very quickly. These are the things that I look at: electrical, vascular, biochemistry, mechanical, energy, hormonal, and immunology. The heart is not one thing. The heart to your cardiologist is only 2 things. Either I'm giving you statins or I'm doing an angiogram. That's really it. This is how you look at the heart. It's a much more complex appreciation of the heart. And what we're going to talk about, these are the things that I've talked about in the past. We're going to talk about these 2 things tonight. This is a representation of atherosclerosis. This is where it starts here. And it actually starts in what they call the basement membrane, which is right here. This little thing right here. This is where all the bad stuff starts. And this is what you end up with. You have a clogged artery. It gets to 90%. They either do a stent or they do bypass on you. And it starts with this. So let's go quickly to a new model of the heart that I have been talking about for years. And it's based on the calcium, what I call the calcium conundrum, meaning it's a reverse flow. So normally what happens in your body as you're aging properly, you're getting enough vitamin D, maybe, you're getting a lot of sunshine, and you are banking calcium in the bones. So there's a positive net flow of calcium into the bones. Okay? What happens is as we age, from a variety of things, what we call secondary hyperthyroidism, not enough vitamin D, what happens is not enough calcium in the blood, and calcium is now coming out of the bones. Calcium out of the bones is called osteoporosis. And so what happens is we get older, we're starting to withdraw money from the bank because we're not getting enough vitamin D, or our parathyroids are getting kind of whacked out. So let's talk about this. So here's the headline that I read as kind of an example of what you'd be reading today. I got a new newsletter that I'm thinking of doing called Beyond the Headlines. So here's the headlines. What's the rest of the story? The story is, in the study of the Archives of Internal Medicine the last month found that men with low vitamin D had a higher risk of heart attacks. Other studies have linked vitamin D with cancer of the breast, ovary, prostate, stomach, bladder, esophagus, kidney, and lung. Low levels of vitamin D also have been associated with high blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, periodontal disease, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, macular degeneration, mental illness, and chronic pain. Sounds pretty impressive. So, breast cancer, not only men. Let me go on. These are the publications that I reviewed. And some of these did only look at men, okay? These publications here, they all pretty much come out with the same conclusion, which is low levels of vitamin D are a cause of heart disease. So these are the ones that I reviewed, okay? What they say is, and what we've known over the last 5 or 10 years, the vitamin D axis affects vascular smooth muscle, inflammation, calcification, that's that reverse calcium flow I just mentioned, the renin-angiotensin system, which is a complex hormonal system that controls sodium retention and elevates your blood pressure or maintains a normal blood pressure, and therefore that's the blood pressure part of it, all of which affect risk of cardiovascular disease and myocardial infarction. It's a heart attack. So, we also know that vitamin D prevents prostate cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, osteoporosis, diabetes. It may have some effect on seasonal affective disorder, multiple sclerosis. Pretty impressive list. So here's the study design. These 3 papers, I'm going to go through these papers and I'm going to show you what they showed. But I'm going to tell you, these are the worst papers I have ever read. These papers are incomprehensible. Phil gave me this subject a couple of weeks ago. I've been trying to read these papers. I've read these papers a dozen times. I cannot understand what they're talking about. So I'm going to try to break it down to the best I can what they're talking about. They said here, one of the biggest studies they had was a study going back to 1986 with 51,000 male healthcare professionals, docs. Then they said between 1993 and 1995, they did a blood sample. First thing, a blood sample. Well, let me tell you something. A blood sample is worthless. It's a point in time. It gives you nothing. Maybe they had a bad week that week. They did 1 blood sample. Somehow they pared it down to 18,225 that provided the samples. Some number were excluded. We don't know why, but they kind of pared it down. And they identified out of that 454 participants who had either a non-fatal MI or a fatal coronary heart disease between the date of collection and January 2004. In other words, about 10 or 11 years. So this whole thing went for 10 or 11 years. So I calculated out, and I actually had to write the author of this to be sure. Did I get this right? Because I cannot figure out what these guys are talking about. And it looks like the incidence was only 2.5%. That seems pretty low to me. Out of this huge sample, only 2.5% had cardiovascular disease, but that's what it shows. So then I broke it down to this, and this shows you here, and you know what? It's really hard to even describe what this is. What they did was, they said, okay, the low point is less than 15 nanograms per milliliter. That means you are really deficient. Greater than 30 means you're sufficient. There's a difference between sufficient and optimal. But they consider that to be sufficient. And then for some reason, arbitrarily, they took two in-between points here of 15 to 22 and 22 to 29. And they broke it down so it comes out here. This is how it breaks down. And if you look at it on a graph, well, I didn't graph this out. What they did then is they showed, and this was the disconnect. And I have no idea how they got these, but they come out with a risk ratio. This is the point of all these studies. The point was they show if you're over 30, that's referent. That means you are sufficient. You got enough. And if you were deficient, you had about 2.5 times the possibility or the probability of developing cardiovascular disease compared to the referent value. And then they broke it down by other different variables, different covariables. So it comes out like this. So here's the referent here, that's 1. That means here it's 2.5%. It's 2.5 times. 250%. That sounds like a lot, right? It's relative values. This is something I tell my patients over and over and over again. Watch out for the way every study measures things in relative values. So what it means is, here's 2.5 times 250% at less than 15 nanograms. So what they're showing you is here, again, the same thing here. Different study. This is a 7-year cumulative rate showing again about, here's 25% chance. This is 10% chance. And if you weren't hypertensive, it's this. What does that mean? Now let me break it down. It means that they're saying, well, it's 250%, 2.5 times for hypertensive, twice as high for, again, the referent value greater than 30 versus really deficient less than 15. But the absolute risk, this take-home message, absolute risk is really only 15% difference or 5% difference for non-hypertensives. It's not 2.5 times. So this thing, which is really important, and I'm really big on vitamin D, I'm a real advocate of it, you got to look at the real statistics saying, well, it's interesting, but it's not 250%. It's only 15% difference. Difference between relative and absolute values. I can't stress this over and over again. So what does that mean? So I pulled out a really stupid example.
No, I think we understand what you're saying about what 15%, what do you mean, 15% after the event?
I'm saying, let me repeat this, okay? This is all I want you to get out of this whole lecture, okay? It's really important. I'm going to show it to you this way. I'm going to show you a different way. I'm going to show you the simplest way I can. A really dumb but really powerful example. This is a carton of milk. This is 2% milk. 2% milk is reduced fat, right? What is regular milk? It's 3% fat. So what does 2% fat mean? It's reduced. It's reduced 37%. It's not. It's reduced 1%. Do you get that? Do you understand that? The difference is, and this is the thing, same thing, is it's new tide. It's 37% better. Better than what? So as much of an advocate as I am, these studies are telling you the same thing as every other study shows you, which is, and this is a stupid example, but I'm trying to bring the point home to you, it's not 37%, it's 1%. That's the difference. That's what the study shows. That's what every single study will quote. That's when they use statin studies, I'll say this. That's when they do any cancer therapy. They say, we get 25% better results over 2 months. All these studies, and here's the problem, here's the bottom line. All these studies are based on determining the lowest level at which significantly increased disease occurs. Therefore, it's the same methodology we've been hearing over and over and over again for the last 30 to 50 years of a minimum RDA. It does not determine ideal or optimal levels. What is the risk reduction above 30 nanograms per milliliter? In other words, we haven't really done a dose response curve. What at 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 100? Now, you know, there's one guy in the community here is advocating 50,000 units a day ad infinitum. I have a patient, he did that. He's got a level of 450 nanograms. 450. What does that mean? What does that mean versus 30? We don't have these statistics. We're currently using, I'm using 60 as my optimal level. It's a good level. And I want to show you one last thing about this study. This thing here is trying to show you maybe a dose response curve. I'm going to show you why this is such a daunting task to look at these papers. I'm going to read you something. If anybody in this audience understands what I'm about to read you, please raise your hand. One person. The nonlinearity of multivariate adjusted relation between baseline vitamin D status and the incident cardiovascular events. The solid lines show estimated relation of adjusted hazard ratios in the 25-hydroxy level when time to cardiovascular event is modeled as a function of penalized regression splines of 25-hydroxy levels with adjustment for all other covariates. I want someone to tell me what that means.
Nonsense. It means nonsense.
I'm trying to figure out who are these guys writing this stuff for? Not me. If I was the editor, I'd say this paper's out. But I would tell most papers are out. Let me go through these things really quickly because my time is about up. And I'm going to get the hook here. These are the different forms of vitamin D. There's vitamin D2. We don't use this. Vitamin D3, this is what we use. And these go through here. It goes through the skin, sunlight. Sunlight then goes to the liver. Then it goes to the kidney. And that's where the active metabolite is converted. And that becomes the active form. So again, I showed you the various effects. This is probably where you might begin to see some, quote, toxicity, but I don't ever see it if you're taking more than 10,000 units. But lots of people have taken up to 100,000 units or more. I told you about this. This is what I told you about the aortic valve. This is a normal aortic valve. It has 3 leaflets. If you had bad calcium, taking Coumadin, genetics, time, bad karma, looks like that. That is a sclerotic aortic valve that's probably in need of replacement. So that's what I meant by aortic sclerosis. So we had this yin-yang, and I showed you that, you know, here's osteoporosis going up, and vitamin K is also just as important. And we can talk about that some other time. We'll talk about MK4 and MK7 and how vitamin K works. Vitamin K is really important. You have to have vitamin D and vitamin K together. These are the things that I use. These are heart-friendly. High-dose vitamin fish oils, CoQ10, carnitine, vitamin E, a sourcing 9, which is a Linus Pauling formula, vitamin C, proline, lysine, taurine, ribose, testosterone, estrogen, thiamine, and vitamin K2. These are all heart-friendly. And finally, so is good dental hygiene, stress reduction, no alcohol, no smoking, high protein, and exercises. So that's an hour lecture in about 15 minutes. I really appreciate your attention.
Beautiful. Thank you, Phil. I think one thing that I learned a long time ago sitting in here, that perhaps the greatest thing we can have are our medical people that have majored in chemistry before they become doctors. Because it's absolutely amazing, the friends of mine who are doctors, and I go out and I play tennis with them, play golf with them, and I mention something and I get blank stares back, and that's the case. Now why don't we do this? Let's take a 6,000 second break, okay? And we'll be back here. And there are 2 comfort stations out there, and we'll have adequate time. And then, yes, go ahead, Phil.
Listen, you know, Phil has only a few copies of this book left.
That's right. Oh, thank you.
He's only got 12 copies back there. If you don't have this book, this is a really excellent book. I mean, when I saw it, I was blown away by how good it was. And I just got an email last week from Dave Yost saying how good it was on a certain subject. It's a remarkable book. So, is the light still on? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, if you haven't got the book, there's 12 copies left back there. You should definitely get
And also on page 223 in there is an article in there on carnosine. Not carnitine, but carnosine. And all of the studies, and Phil turned me on to that some years ago, all of the studies show that by and large, when we take carnosine into our system, theoretically, most of our cells will reproduce 50 times in our lifetime. They'll reproduce, die, reproduce, die, reproduce, die. If we take carnosine under the tongue, take it twice a day, our cell life will go from 50 to 56 to 62. Now that's a 12 to a 22% longer lifespan. So I know a lot of you are nuisances to your families. If you do that, you'll continue to be a nuisance for a good longer period. But that's covered in the book, and it's worth reading. And as I said, only a dozen copies there. So let's take our 6,000.
How much are the books there, Don? How much are the books?
25. No, I'm sorry, thank you. 600.
25.